All right, hey, welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the last episode where we talked about the escalation, the improvement, or the increase in troops, some of the backlash behind that. Today, we're going to be focusing on Army.
Army.
We're going.
And Marines. We'll
right.
give them their name.
Yes. But we're going battlefield today.
Yes.
And we're talking now about the beginning of 1968, late January of 1968.
Right. The Ted Holiday is, I can't remember the quote from Full Metal Jacket, but it's absolutely great.
Yeah.
It's like, 4th of July, Christmas, and New Year's all rolled into one.
Right.
And it's typically the first new moon of what we would consider the year.
Right.
So it is the New Year. It's the Vietnamese New Year, Lunar New Year.
And
it's a huge holiday. I mean,
right.
people go home. Literally, ARVN troops, whole units would be given leave to go home.
I mean, it's typically a ceasefire.
Yes.
A traditional ceasefire between the North and the South to allow for a celebration of everyone, of giving everyone an opportunity, and giving them a chance to celebrate.
Well, and it's one of those things that held on in the North.
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah.
A communist, supposedly atheist country, they're going to keep this holiday because trying to get rid of it, you might as well shoot yourself in the foot.
Right.
It's not going to happen. It's a huge day. Fireworks, music, parades, parties. I mean, it's got everything.
Again, like we see, 4th of July, Christmas, and New Year's all rolled into one, which is true. But what we find, and like we mentioned last time, we start to hear some chatter.
With some grumblings that, hey, something big's coming.
Yes.
This isn't, they're not losing the war.
No.
Or if they are, they're going to do something before it's over.
Right.
And that's a huge... But other than, sending out ridiculous orders of the day to be alert, it's hard when you see literally throngs of people going by your firebase happy.
Yeah, right.
They're going to visit their relatives. They're
right.
going back to the farm, whatever.
You don't think anything of it because again, it is something that you're used to, especially if you've been in country for more than a year. More than a year. Yeah, you'd know how people are.
Which unfortunately would be very few.
Right.
You'd have some guys who got there at Tet or right after.
Right.
They wouldn't have seen what Tet was, or they would have heard about it maybe. But
right.
Again, hearing isn't the same as seeing and believing.
Right.
Very true. And we've kind of left off last time with that decrease in combat.
Yes.
In late '67, very early '68, except for an area of this fire base out near the Cambodian border, Khe Sanh.
Right.
And that's really, to me, it's like the big battle. Because you got troops, tanks. I mean, the NVA bring tanks to Khe Sanh.
Would you compare it kind of like the Battle of the Bulge and almost the Battle of Bastogne?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, very much so. You got this whole battle of the Bulge, or Tet Offensive raging.
Yes.
And Khe Sanh's kind of the premiere.
Right.
This is the big fight. Because, what we can talk about the others. The VC and the NVA did an amazing job of infiltrating and attacking things we thought were protected.
Yeah, taking all sorts of bases throughout the South. Or, I'm sorry, attacking, not actually taking.
Well, like the embassy, they took.
Yes, they did. They
overran the embassy in Saigon, which, of course, bad for video.
Oh my goodness, yes. When you've got your news cameras pointed in Saigon. And that's getting sent back to the States, and that's not going to look good.
When you see the video, it's interesting when you see a lot of the video.
Right.
Again, I'd recommend the History Channel Vietnam in HD.
Mm-hmm.
Got really good videos. So a lot of stuff I hadn't seen before, despite watching who knows how many documentaries.
Right.
But when you see the guys who are doing the fighting, they're just not running around with a lot of equipment like you see when you see pictures of them in the bush.
Right.
Or even on a fire base.
Yeah.
These are literally rear echelon guys who are being called to become infantry to retake the embassy, or to defend their air base or whatever.
Well, for those who are old enough to watch Full Metal Jacket,
Yes.
when they see what is going on with that offensive, the Tet Offensive, I mean, you've got Joker, and you've got him coming out onto the bunker, or into the sandbags,
Yeah.
the foxhole, and he has no clue as to what's going on. Now, of course, being a Marine, he's infantry first.
Right, rifleman first.
Right, rifleman first, but again, he doesn't know what the heck's going on. He hadn't probably shot his rifle since basic training, more
No,
than
he's
likely.
a combat photographer.
Right,
or
and a
correspondent
journalist.
Or whatever. He's not shooting anything.
No, but again, like what we mentioned, that they're not having your your combat vets helping to protect these places.
Well, yeah,
so much.
I mean, that's a normal plan for
Right.
any base in a combat zone, is that everybody has a fighting position.
Yeah,
In this case, or Full Metal Jacket's case, of course, they're guarding one of the gates.
yeah,
And the Vietnamese, Viet Cong, they send their sappers, which are it's a nice way to say guys carrying explosives.
sure.
They're going to try to blow a hole in the wire, get inside the base, because if you can get inside the base, you can do all sorts of damage.
Yeah.
One grenade in a fuel depot, and life is
Boom.
miserable. Or even if you, I mean, what's an F4 Phantom worth?
If you know,
I mean,
yeah,
several $1 million,
Yeah.
but morale-wise, you took out planes. That's
yeah,
awesome.
That's big. That's big.
And so, but they go after high-value targets.
Right.
President's Palace in
Mhm.
Saigon, Presidential Palace in Saigon, the embassy in Saigon, the Da Nang, pretty much everywhere. And they go after these protected villages, these areas that had supposedly been secured. And they start slaughtering anybody who was a cooperative. And by slaughtering those that are cooperative, I mean anybody they see as part of the government, which is teachers.
Anyone in religion.
Any religious person is pretty much. I mean, the French have a large presence still there in the
Right.
in the religious community, nuns and missionaries
Mhm.
and monks,
But you
and
also
they are targets all the time.
right, and you also see it as doctors.
Yes.
Anyone who is again
Well, educated,
Right.
which I guess to flash forward, we see the same mentality in Cambodia.
Right.
I mean, Cambodia is probably never, maybe not never, but probably not for 100 years, going to be an effective country because they literally killed the top 20% of the educated people in their country.
Yes.
Not the top 20% educated, the top 20% who had any education.
Right. And the Khmer Rouge
Just
completely
absolutely clean
wiped
house.
them out.
And so the VAC don't have much difference.
No.
Anybody who's got an education is probably Western, so kill them.
Yes. We don't like them. We don't want them here.
Which kind of shows you the underlying truth. Are they really communists? Are they really just anti-imperialist?
Which I think would probably be the better wording of them, because again, they have been taken over by French, Japanese,
Now-
French again.
Now
the
affecting
Americans.
affecting.
Right. I mean, with the increase in number of troops by over 400,000 by the end of '67, and ever increasing into 1968, these Vietnamese are not dumb. They know when a major invasion force is headed their way.
Well, I mean, you didn't have to be very partisan in Vietnam to realize that the president in Vietnam could order his own food.
yeah.
Otherwise, everything had to go through the Americans.
Right.
Because they're the ones calling the shots. They're the ones paying the bills.
Right.
They're the ones with the combat troops. And if they don't want you in power, as DM found out,
Yep. You're done.
if they don't want you in power, you're not.
Right.
So, for all intents and purposes, South Vietnam is a colony of the United States by 1967.
Yes.
I don't think Americans saw it that way,
No.
despite the fact that most likely they ran the president just like that.
Yes.
I think they, when you see, what's the story? It's a general, and he is a Vietnamese aide. It was played by Bill Paxton. Good story. Anyway, he was a very pro-Vietnam American.
Okay.
So he was really wanting to create a Vietnam like the idea, what we said we wanted.
Yes.
That's what he was really wanting to work towards. Ends up dying, I think, in a helicopter crash.
Oh,
Um,
gotta love that.
But anyway, so Saigon, a large part of the city is just fighting.
Yeah.
We see that in Hue.
Right.
Half of the city falls to the Viet Cong and the NVA. I mean, that's territory taken.
Yeah.
And then of course the battle at Khe Sanh. We're talking thousands of troops ringing this Marine base to the point where they can't land airplanes. They're literally flying them over quick and dropping cargo
Oh wow. Yeah.
out the back
Yeah.
because they can't set down. It's too dangerous because they're too close and they're shooting their 12.7 millimeters.
Right.
50 cal for them.
Right.
At them all over the place. And so it becomes, and this is the one that Johnson gets absolutely obsessed with, because his fear was that this was DNBN Phu Part 2.
Right.
Just, so he has a full-scale map in the war room, and he's worried about the politics of, because if it falls,
Then we're done.
there's no rescue for this war.
No.
We will be out of the country by the end of the year. I mean, he won't have a choice.
Right.
So we're bringing in B-52s from
Right,
Guam
yeah.
and the Philippines.
Yeah.
Every bit of air power we can summon is blasting the VC and the NVA that are encircling Khe Sanh.
And so, in theoretically, jumping ahead just a few months, what is the outcome of the Tet Offensive? Is it a positive outcome for Americans, or is it a positive outcome for the VC in the North Vietnam?
Yep.
Well, that's a simple answer.
Militarily, it was a disaster for the VC. They didn't take any territory they have to keep.
No.
I mean, by March,
Right.
Hue is cleared.
Right.
Saigon is cleared.
Yeah.
In fact, by June, 80% of the VC are dead.
That's
That's catastrophic. That's the kind of body count we're looking for.
what we wanted.
We got exactly what we wanted militarily on the tactical and operational level.
You bring your troops
Yes.
out, and we're fighting.
Yeah. They had these minor victories.
Sure.
But once we ran them out of the embassy, you could still use the embassy.
Yeah. It's not like they.
It's
kept
not
going.
like they took it and ran off to Hanoi with it.
Right.
It's
Right.
like
It's
they
still
didn't
there in
steal it.
It's still there in Saigon.
It's still
so-
there. They didn't hold the territory, so, and yes, did they scare people? Of course they scared people, because
Right.
obviously Lyndon Johnson, top of the list of scared.
Yes.
He's worried Khe Sanh will fall. And I'm sure in the Vietnamese government there were guys that were packing their bags and looking for their first flight to LA.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah. I'd love to get the heck out of here.
I'll have a connecting flight through Manila, thanks.
Yeah.
Whatever gets me out of the country now.
Sure.
And so on the tactical level, it was a disaster. It's just the number of casualties the NBA and the VC lost in a military sense were not worth the deaths.
Right.
But when we look at the strategic level and the popular opinion level, Tet was an amazing victory, because they literally used our own press against us. They got Walter Cronkite, I'm the most trusted man in America. Don't even get me started on him. Because we live in a town that's got a museum to him, and don't
Yeah.
even get me started on him.
Yeah.
Saying that the war's unwinnable.
But we destroyed 80% of the VC.
If the VC is gone as a fighting force, and the NVA is beaten back so that it's going to take them 4 years to return as a significant
Then
fighting force on the battlefield.
So how are we losing? How is it unwinnable?
How is that unwinnable? In fact, that makes it more winnable.
Right.
Because we still got 500,000 guys here.
And again, we did what we wanted them to do in the first place.
Yeah,
we
come
had
out
them-
and fight.
Yes, we had them come out to fight, and fight on our terms, not on we trying to search and destroy them.
I would say by the middle of February, we're fully on the counteroffensive.
Of course.
We've got troops going out in the bush, chasing down elements that attacked our bases, and they've left trails because they've been carrying all these mortars and
Right.
B-40 rockets and RPGs into there, and they had to come out. And whenever they come out, they left evidence, and we would hunt them. And so the casualties keep on coming. It's not just the mass casualties like we see in Full Metal Jacket, where they
Right.
storm the gate and don't even get anybody inside.
Right, but the
You
problem.
see 50 guys walked out.
Yeah, and again, the problem is of course, we in country see this as okay, not the people in Saigon, not the people up in the upper echelon, but the people who are in the middle and on the foot patrols. They see this as a good thing. They see this as a positive, and yet
when they get aggressive, which is good.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you don't want combat soldiers that aren't aggressive.
no, but we get
But-
a little too aggressive in one case.
And we get one case. I mean, probably more than one. Honestly.
Yeah, but the one
But one that was egregiously bad.
Yes.
And when you look at the evidence, it's just impossible. And that's, of course, My Lai,
hmm
with Captain Calley and his gang. Again, though, I don't think there was any convictions other than him,
I think he was the only one. Yes.
because he's the one that telling them that there was fire coming from the village. And
Right.
and these guys aren't going to run out there and find out if there's women and children in there. They're doing what they're told to do.
Yeah, they're following the orders of their commander.
Right. And so we end up with this massacre, which I don't think breaks until May. It doesn't break
No,
right
right,
after it happened.
right,
It
yeah.
wasn't. It wasn't
It
one of
wasn't-
those things that was like, oh, the press was right there. It was,
No, it
showed
took a
up
little
later.
while.
But when
Um,
it breaks,
Oh my gosh, it's
it takes the steam that we might have been able to develop
right,
from a military standpoint. How do we combat this propaganda loss of January and February
right,
and turn it into a victory? Well, February through April, where we're hunting these guys down and burning out their networks.
right.
This is good stuff. And then this breaks.
Yes, and we're
And the chance of recovering of the war pretty much over, I think, at that point.
right because again, not in country but at home, we're seeing this as a major defeat. We're seeing it. We allowed them to infiltrate our base. We allowed them to take over what we thought was the embassy to never take over again.
I'm not sure how that came, but we're viewing it from the people at home. The idea we lost our embassy is huge. That should have been protected.
Right.
It was, but not well enough.
You've got 2 squads of Marines, and then some of the
They
military
had-
army there.
I think they had a company of Marines,
but still,
but they weren't all on the grounds.
right.
So it wasn't like we had 300 Marines waiting inside the compound.
No.
It was like an active duty platoon or something like that was on.
So I mean, think about it. The way the news organizations spin it.
Well, it's a trust issue. Honestly, you've been telling us for the last 6 months that we were winning the war.
Yeah.
If we were winning the war, how could this happen? Now, of course, to me, the perfect analogy that I would have trotted out if I was Westmoreland was Battle of the Bulge.
Right.
Hitler was defeated, but the Battle of the Bulge still caught us by surprise.
Right.
This is their Battle of the Bulge.
Exactly.
Yep, they made some early victories, but guess what? Caisson held,
Yes.
just like Bastogne.
Right.
We pushed them back everywhere. So by the time, spring in America comes,
Right.
the VC are defeated.
Right.
And
And never to return either.
no,
Never to
they
return.
really become a secondary thing to the NBA.
Right. Which again causes even more of this split. More of the split between your troops in country and your people at home, and are looking at this and they're saying, "Oh, what in the world?" It's like,
But this is also where we'll see the flip of the switch. Up until now,
right,
and we see it at the later that summer at the Chicago Convention,
yes,
Democratic
yes,
National Convention.
1968.
The
June.
protests
Oh my
coming from
goodness.
people today who would probably be listed as Democrats,
Right,
protesting at their own party's convention.
right.
Not something you would typically see today.
No,
I mean, just the way the politics are today. But we see blaming Johnson's war.
yeah, and that was a
We
big
shouldn't be
thing.
there.
No,
And then we see after this, we start seeing the switch to baby killer.
right,
And it's because of My Lai, or Me Lai, however you say it.
right,
And it's like amazing enough, and of course, the press being the press, hop on whatever bandwagon they can.
yeah, of course,
And so now the rest of Vietnam becomes a hunt for atrocities.
yeah. What else can we find? What else
Right,
can we?
what else can we
cover?
find?
What can
Obviously, if we found that one, we can find more elsewhere.
yeah,
But it really puts such a crimp in the ability to fight the war. Well, Johnson's done. He announces he's not going to run for re-election.
Well, he did that when April, May of '68 is
Yeah,
when
I
he
mean,
did
that's-
that. Yeah,
In this time frame,
right.
he knows that it's not winnable because the way it's portrayed is it's a massive defeat. And militarily, it was anything but.
Right.
It was a defeat of faith. You've been telling us the war was winnable. It obviously isn't, even though,
We're
looking at it,
right. Militarily.
hindsight,
mhm.
we probably could have won the war, especially if we would have been trotting out the ARVN in any sort of meaningful fashion
Yes.
after Tet.
Well, being armchair quarterback,
Yeah.
those things were easily be able to be done. But again,
We would have had to spend the time and energy. That's a lot of advisors and
Yes.
a lot of. I was thinking about it before we came over to do this. Like before 1965, a lot of this was the tail wagging the dog. You had
Right.
a small number of advisors trying to get a bigger involvement because what they saw on the ground.
yes,
But then the big dog came to play, and the tail just does what the tail tells us. So when we look at like a MACV SOG, Military Systems Command Vietnam Special Operations Group,
right,
who were basically the SEALs / Delta Force of Vietnam.
yeah,
Well, some of them were SEALs.
right,
We also see like the involvement of Air America and the
Mhm.
mercenary outfits that the CIA hires to operate in Cambodia and Laos. But we can't prosecute a war effectively with mercenaries
no,
because they're not as willing to take casualties as you can with regular troops.
right,
But everything's been knocked off kilter, and it wouldn't have been off kilter if they would have been honest from the first.
good point.
I mean, can you imagine if Westmoreland would have got up in, say, December of '67 and said, "Hey, we've been reporting this decrease in enemy activity for the last 3 months, and we think they're getting ready for a large-scale offensive. We don't know when it's coming, but we know it's coming soon." Then all of a sudden, the American people are like, "Oh, well, we're waiting. We know it's coming."
Yeah,
And how would that have changed the mindset of even the ARVN or the embassy? Maybe we wouldn't have just had a platoon. Maybe we would have had a whole company on station all the time during January.
right, right.
Or at least until something popped off that we could point at as an offensive.
And I think then we wouldn't have had such a downgrade in our political and social awareness of the world.
Right, because by the end of '68 we flipped. Now instead of 60-40, we're 40-60,
Yeah,
supporting the war.
right,
So there's no way, whoever gets elected is going to have to get us out of this war.
right.
Whether it's
Well,
Bobby Kennedy or
Richard Nixon was
or Hubert Humphrey.
right. Yeah, it was Hubert Humphrey after Robert Kennedy that was
Yes.
unfortunately assassinated in June of
Right, but
68.
it didn't matter who won the convention.
Right.
Whoever, Republican or Democrat,
Yeah.
whoever wins, gonna
Boom.
have to figure out a way
Mhm.
to get us out of this war.
And
And it's weird. It's like, it's a Midway kind of moment.
it is.
The Japanese had no chance to recover after Midway, but they didn't give up. And honestly speaking, we didn't either until '72.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
But that's foreshadowing. Sorry,
Yes,
in case you didn't know how this turned out.
I hope. Well, if the amount of foreshadowing that we've put into
Oh, and the
these-
amount of unrest
yes,
in the United States caused by all this, the riots, the protests that get bigger and bigger.
right,
And of course, this is all culminating with, the civil rights movement kind of reached its peak in '65.
right,
This just kind of morphs right over into maybe not exactly the same people, but a lot of the same people are being active. Martin Luther King Jr. is against the war.
sure. He isn't assassinated until '68.
Right, and he's in March of '68 or
April, I believe. But the idea is this. Think about it. The idea is this. You now start to see some of those activists with the Black Panthers. You have some major political and military style, paramilitary
Yeah.
style activist groups that are willing and able to go and destroy American involvement in the war. They want to destroy American involvement in the war.
And they will do anything in their power to make that happen.
Oh, for sure.
And I guess, the difference is today we have, Antifa and Proud Boys.
Yes.
And on opposite ends of the spectrum. The problem with Tet is it knocks the legs out of the supporters of the war.
Right.
They no longer have a this is a good cause because they've been lied to as well. They
Right.
get disillusioned and change sides
And-
pretty quickly
And that's the
because
thing.
they were lied to through all of 1967 and honestly since 1964.
Right.
You know, and then when the Pentagon Papers come out later,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
but that details the fact that the Gulf of Tonkin was just a hoax, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, it just absolutely, even today with our dislike of government in the United States and the problems we have with our democracy, we're nowhere near as bad as it was then.
No.
Because the disillusionment with our leadership in '68 was, I don't know how it could have gotten much lower.
Right. You can say what you want about the presidents in the 2000s and into the 2020s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people don't like them. People are they feel they've been lied to. They've been
Everybody's
betrayed.
very polarized. You
Right.
either like them or you hate them.
Right.
And there's no in
It's-
between.
Right. In the 60s, especially in the later 60s, oh my goodness. You know, we were in a time bomb practically.
Well, I mean,
Politically,
there's literally blood in the
socially,
streets.
right. I mean, think about it. 1968 or Democratic National Convention in Chicago.
Right.
You have the Chicago Police Department. You have the Illinois National Guard coming out, and they're making what are called daily dozers
Yeah.
because of Mayor Daley in
Right.
Chicago. But they are literal barbed wire and steel, welded machines on a Jeep
Right.
that are pushing people through the streets of Chicago.
Forcing them away.
Yes, and people are being beaten with police nightsticks and
Rifle butts and everything
bludgeoned, and they're being taken away. I mean, it was a disaster.
Well, it's a nightly casualty report.
Right.
Once again on the news because if it bleeds, it leads.
Right, exactly. So not only are you seeing it in the Vietnam body counts, now you're starting to see it in American political movements.
And of course, Chicago, really, it happens in Chicago because of the convention.
Right. Yes.
But most of it, of course, is in California, New York.
Yeah.
The bigger
Metropolitan.
cities.
Right.
I mean, you come to the Midwest and hippies aren't even hardly a thing.
Right.
I mean, it's just a different culture,
Well,
of course.
take Merle Haggard, in the anti-protest,
Okie from Muskogee.
Okie from Muskogee,
Yes, you're right. You're right.
But then again, you have your protest singers like Bob Dylan and CCR and
Oh, yeah.
the Rolling Stones, but
Yeah, Janis Joplin.
right, but these people they're producing things for everyone.
Yes.
Of course, the Stones, CCR, they're kind of the protest version, but then you've got like country music where they're anti-protest.
Well, they're anti-protest, but you start to see even the anti-war leak into there.
Yes.
You know,
do.
and really, it's always hinges on the question of why.
Yeah.
Why should I go
Right.
10,000 miles away, as Lyndon Johnson said,
Yeah.
to fight a war that the Vietnamese should be fighting? Now, two reasons, of course, nobody understands that is because, well, the press doesn't hang out with ARVN units
Nope.
because they don't speak Vietnamese,
No. Unfortunately.
and they're not in the Caravel Hotel. But
No. True.
And so they don't see the ARVN fighting like they see Americans fighting
No.
in Vietnam. So it even though we've already talked about the Americanization
Mhm.
last time of the war, and the ARVN being sidelined into static roles,
Right.
garrisons and patrol
Yeah.
of major arteries. You just don't see I don't know what the best word is, but the American people are definitely not. They're seeing it even more lopsided than it is
Yeah.
because they're seeing no role for the ARVN,
Right.
and we're guarding their country,
Right.
we're fighting the enemy,
right.
and they're not.
Yeah.
So even the people who are I don't know that there are too many people that are pro-war, so to speak,
Yeah. You
but
don't
they
really
are
have.
they are supportive of our involvement in Vietnam because they believe
Yeah.
that we can create a functional democracy in Vietnam.
Well.
I mean that's
Yeah.
that's the belief, and I dislike intensely when people denigrate people who served because of that reason.
Sure.
They went and they volunteered because they believed that we could save South Vietnam's democracy.
Well.
We did it in Korea.
Right, and that's the thing. We're seeing it in the terms of, hey, the generation before us fought in World War II.
And brought,
And brought-
now we have Germany and Japan are democracies.
Right. And many of those people who had fought in World War II more than likely fought in Korea as well.
A lot of them, yeah.
So, you know, they see it. They're their uncles, they're possibly even their fathers. They want to do the same, especially people from, you know, smaller communities. But unfortunately, when they come back, they get the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
And
Well, because there's that switch.
yeah,
You start hearing the baby killer
yeah,
and, you know, guys being spit on and
yes,
stuff
right,
when they come back in the airport. And to me that, again, we talked about this in the intro.
right,
You know, I served 12 years after the war ended for us, really.
yeah,
And I was still being told that I shouldn't wear my uniform off post.
it's a sad
Because
sight,
the Army's always slow to react to
but-
things.
yeah,
Um,
that's true.
But 1968 is the turning point. The Tet
It is.
Offensive, and of course, the associated propaganda victory
Right.
of Tet.
Mm-hmm.
Tet as a military offensive was fairly well conceived,
Yes.
well executed. Just
Right.
the problem is it put the VC and the NBA out where we could kill them.
Yes.
And we're good at that.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, we learned our lesson in Vietnam, or not Vietnam, but Korea,
Right.
fighting the Chinese,
Right.
which is why we were running around with everybody carried an automatic weapon. We had
Yeah.
we had an M60 with every squad, you know.
Well,
You
and
know?
again, we've mentioned this before. The people who are going through basic training in Vietnam are practically what, you know, like theoretically what the special forces would be in World War II. These are basic.
Well, Vietnam, no, they're still getting trained, like we see in Full Metal Jacket.
Oh, okay.
It's a lot of the same, more esprit de corps building, physical fitness, getting them ready. Because, I mean, none of these shows actually show you like AIT, which I find interesting.
Yeah.
They don't show them learning to be infantrymen, they show them learning how to be Marines
Right.
in Full Metal Jacket. We don't see it in like Platoon.
No.
Or all the rest of them, we don't see training at all.
No, it's just you're
Uh,
right in the thick of it.
We see a little bit of it in Green Beret,
Yeah.
but that's Special Forces already,
Right.
so that doesn't count.
Right.
No, we don't see that cool stuff until we go to Iraq, when we see volunteer army
True. You're right.
doing stuff that Special Forces did in, you know, an 11 Bang Bang would not have been doing most of the stuff that, in Iraq they were doing Special Forces stuff for Vietnam.
I see.
That to me, it just stuck out. The things that they were doing were so much bigger than typical 11 Bang Bang 0300 riflemen.
Mhm.
Because they're volunteers and you can train them harder.
Right.
And but anyway, that's a completely different war.
Sorry.
We
Yep.
can talk about that war later. But this war, I wish I could say it's over in 1968, but it's not. We're going to drag this out for a while.
Yeah, for at least another what?
So,
7 years?
well, let's see, 68. Technically, yeah, the war didn't end for 7 years. Our involvement goes down. It still takes 5
Yeah.
for us to get out of the
Yeah.
war, which is pretty amazing.
Mm.
That's but again, what is Nixon's battle cry? Peace with honor.
Peace with honor. Mm-hmm.
And Vietnamization.
Mm-hmm.
Stand up the Vietnamese so they can fight the war on their own.
Yeah.
But we've got that big gap we talked about. The
Right.
junior officers aren't really prepared to fight a war. They don't know how to do it because they've been just living in garrison and
Mhm.
protecting static locations. And now they need to be offensive now.
Right.
And it's very difficult to move that way, especially as we move into 70, 71. They know the Americans are leaving eventually.
Yeah.
So that kind of takes a lot of the wind out of your sails.
It does.
It's like, hey, I'm winning this bar fight. Then my giant Uncle Bob, who looks like Andre the Giant, decided he had to go home.
Yeah. And go take care of his little chihuahua.
And I'm like, eh.
Yeah.
Now I'm
But-
taking on Hell's Angels by myself.
But hey, just you know what? Keep viewing our show, and if you have any questions, please let us know. We'll be hitting into some interesting points.
Yeah, when we
As
go
we
into
go
the
into-
future of the
Yeah.
war, probably 3 more episodes.
Yeah.
That we'll finish this war up. But we forgot to mention it last time.
Yes.
We're actually filming today on the
Right.
58th anniversary of the start of
Right.
the first American offensive
Right.
in June of '65.
Which is amazing
you know,
how long ago that was.
well, yeah, it's a whole. I mean, it's not even our generation.
No.
Not even my generation.
No.
I grew up. My JROTC instructors were both veterans. Well, granted, my sergeant major was a veteran of World War II,
Three wars.
Korea and Vietnam,
Yeah.
and my first sergeant was Korea and Vietnam. So,
Crazy.
I mean, you know, looking back at that, that's the guys I grew up with that I looked at with respect.
Yeah.
Will be interesting to see how many of those that served in Iraq and Afghanistan find those roles, because our OTC programs are closing up around the country.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Defense Department doesn't even fund them very well anymore. You can't start a new one.
No.
But anyway,
Have a good night.
see ya.